Who's feeling lucky? Would you love to get rid of your fabric scraps and make these super cute fabric fortune cookies? Because I'm going to show you how easy they are to do, and I'm going to show you 4 different methods depending on exactly how long you want to spend on this and what materials you have in your stash that you want out and doing something fun. So when I showed this to my husband, he said, "But why are you making fortune cookies out of fabric? You can't eat that." And I said, number 1, because I can. Number 2, because I want to. And there's no more reasons needed than that, right? And they're eco-friendly. This is what I tell them. They fold really flat. You can save them, use them next year. The people can use them next year. They could be really cute for place cards too. Say you're having a Chinese New Year party or a Valentine's Day dinner. You could make a longer fortune and have the people's names sticking out. Put that on the plate. How cute would that be? Okay, enough of my ideas. Let's get into it. Now, let's quickly go over materials. You can make these little fortune cookies with lots of scraps of materials that you have at home. And that's why I'm going to show you a few different methods. Some are a little bit easier than others. Some, it just depends what you have in your stash and what you want to use and get rid of. So you're going to need 5-inch squares of fabric or felt or combination for the smaller ones. For the bigger one that I use for money, 6.5-inch. Then you're going to need some way to draw a circle. I use this bowl, which happens to be just under 5 inches. So I'll show you how I'm going to use that on these pre-cuts. I'm also going to be using my circle ruler by Lori Holt for the 6-inch. But again, just grab what you have. If you have a bowl that's a little more than 6 inches, make your squares a little bit bigger. You just want your fabric to be slightly bigger than whatever you're going to be tracing. Then to give them stability, you can use fabric and felt, or you can use 2 kinds of fabric. But then to give it that stability, you're going to need to use something. So I tested a couple things. This one has a Pellon interfacing, and I used the Shapeflex SF191. And I really like that because it gives it the stability and it's super thin too. So it turns really nicely, gives you that nice shape. But if you don't have that kind of material sitting around, grab some fusible fleece. Most people have that. We're going to work with what you have. I definitely recommend pinking shears, a heat erasable pen. You could use a regular pen. I just always have these, so I use that. Seam ripper of your choice, a ruler, rotary cutter, some pins. And because these projects are small, I'm going to be using my Cricut Easy Press Mini instead of a big iron. I find it easier to see what I'm doing, and I'll show you this when we get to that step. And you know what? Let's let vanity set in, and I'm going to admit I don't melt my nail polish as much with this as I do with my big iron when I'm working on small projects. So let's get started. The first one we're going to do is going to be the simplest. We are going to take 1 piece of fabric and 1 piece of felt, the wrong side of the fabric onto the felt, because there's really not a wrong side to felt. And we are going to trace a circle. A lot of people tell you to cut circles and sew them together. And I'm like, do we really need that step? Because after you sew them, you're going to have to cut again with the pinking shears. So I decided, let's use our time wisely. Let's sew and only cut once. Instead of cutting 2 circles, sewing them, and then trimming the edges, we're just going to sew and trim the edges. So for this one, the outside of the fortune cookie is going to be a zigzag cut. This is your fastest one. You're basically going to sew around it, trim, sew a little stitch line, and you're done. Our next set is going to be made with the same materials, 1 pre-cut or 5-inch square, and a piece of felt. But this time I'm going to put the fabric right side down on the felt, and we're going to trace that again. This one is different because we are going to sew and then we are going to flip it, press it, and top stitch so that the fortune cookie has a smooth edge like actual fortune cookies do. This one is basically the same materials as this, but we have turned the fabric this way. We're going to sew a 1/4 inch inside that circle. Our next 2 are basically the same. We're just going to have different innards, different material to stiffen it and give it the shape that it needs. So this set, we're going to put right sides together. This one's a pre-cut. This is just cut from a scrap. That's why that has straight edges. And I have already ironed on the Shapeflex from Pellon, which is a pretty lightweight interfacing. Again, I'm going to take my bowl and I'm going to draw that circle. And then I'm going to put 2 little pins in there. You could do 2 or 3. I find 2 works fine. And we're going to sew with about a 1/4 inch to the inside of that line. This one, again, a scrap pre-cut and a scrap piece of fabric, right sides together. This one has fusible fleece on the back, and I'm gonna have this side up just because this is bigger and I wanna make sure my bowl stays on that pre-cut. And again, we're gonna sew on the inside of that. When you're sewing curves and circles, and especially smaller ones, you wanna use a pretty small stitch size so that you get a nice curve when you turn it right side out. What helps with a good smooth curve is not only how well you clip that fabric to bend so that it can form that curve, but also how many little spots there are on the curve that are sewn. So I usually sew something like this with a 1.9 or a 2.0 stitch. So this one is the big one. And just like with the others, I put the right side of the fabric down on felt and drew my circle. Now, because I cut this a little bit bigger, and you can do this with these smaller ones too, but because my scraps were a bit bigger than the circle and I have at least a 1/4 inch all the way around, this one I'm going to sew right on the line and then trim. So whether you sew on the line or inside the line just depends on how big your fabric is and how big your bowl is. Like had I found a little bit smaller bowl for the pre-cuts, I could have done that as well. So like I said, this is a use what you have and make it work kind of a project. Now it is time to use our pinking shears. We are just going to trim all the way around our circles, all of them. And this is instead of clipping to get these curves. Just make sure that you do not clip your stitching. And you also want to leave maybe 2 inches not trimmed close. So see how I did that? It's close here, and then this one is a little bit bigger. That's where we're gonna pull a few stitches and turn this right side out. And we need to make sure that we have enough fabric that we can press that under and stitch that closed. So looking at these different methods, what do you think your preference will be? Felt and fabric, or get rid of more fabric scraps by doing 2 fabrics and something on the inside to give it shape and body? Let me know in the comments. This is the one I told you was going to be the easiest, and I wasn't lying. This is the outside, this is the inside. So we aren't going to have to flip it, we're not going to have to press it, we're not going to have top stitch. But this fortune cookie is going to have pinking shear edges. So you're just going to cut all the way around, no need to leave any kind of a tab. This would be a really fun project to do with kids, to do with scouting groups. Maybe they're learning to sew or earning a sewing badge. I assume those things still exist. It could be something that they make to give away when they're doing some charitable work. Now I'm going to show you how we're going to turn these. So we sewed all the way around. Previously, I had done a video where I did something circle and I left an opening, and somebody suggested, don't do that. Sew all the way around and then just pull stitches. So I was like, well, that's a novel idea. Let's give it a try. And I have to say I like it. So I just pull a couple stitches and then I get my seam ripper in there, and I love this thing. Look how it just sits on my finger. I know I talk about it every time I use it, but I still love it. You're just gonna push that through. And what she said was, now you kind of have a guideline when you're going to be turning it in where the stitches were. It kind of affects the fabric. So if you need to pull it a little further than your tab, you can, but you want to try and make your tab about the amount of space to get this turned right side out. And then I just run my finger right along that edge and see how nice and curved that is, because we did the small stitches and we did the pinking shear clips, so that that fabric is able to lay into that curve so nicely. Now I've heated up my Cricut mini press and we're gonna get this done. So I kind of push that down so that the edges are good. And now we just have to deal with this section. And I usually do it one side at a time and get it as curved as possible. So I press that top part and then I'm pressing around the seam. Now I'm going to tuck this tab under, and I don't know if you saw how I crimped that a little bit, kind of folded it a little bit, so that it would make a better curve. Okay, so I'm gonna press that. Oh, it's hot. You can even see the color difference, how hot it is. So this is a good time to grab a quilter's clapper or a tailor's clapper, and it absorbs that heat. So now the heat's here and not on my fingers. Now this will be top stitched. So now we're going to do that for the rest of the fortune cookies. You can leave white in your machine and then the stitching will really show when you top stitch around here, or you can change your threads. So I've decided to go with red on the top and pink on the bottom. I am going to do my little pull the bobbin through the fabric trick. So if you don't know this already, put your foot down, hold this thread, put your needle down, and give it a little pull. and that will pull that bobbin thread up top. Then if you take both of these threads, pull them away, and when you start to sew, neither of them are going to get dragged down underneath to make what I like to call a bird's nest. And then just either knot or go forward and back a little bit, and then we're going to top stitch all the way around. And again, you want to top stitch with a pretty small stitch so that it gives you a nice curve. All right, back to our pressing mat. We have all of our circles sewn. So here's the goal. We're going to be folding them in half with the inside of the fortune cookie showing. So right sides together. Then we're going to be marking with a pencil or a pen, or I will of course be using my trusty heat erasable pen for exactly where we want that line to be. Then once that's done, you're done. All you do is you flip this, kind of push out that center so it doesn't look square, and then make it a little bit floppy. Now, question is, how much do you want your fortune cookie to be open? So you'll see these are two different variations. That one isn't open very much, and this one is open quite a bit more. That depends on how far you keep that line from the open edge of the semicircle once we fold it in half. So this one, we started in a whole inch from the edge. This one, I started a ½ inch, so you'll see it makes a big difference. This is also showing you why I'm going to tell you match both the top and the bottom, so the top thread and the bobbin's thread, to your outside fabric, because if it strains and you see these threads, that really pops out and it would be much, much less noticeable if it was red. So now we're going to start with this one that was super easy. There was no turning, no pressing crazy curves. Oh my gosh, so fantastic. So we're going to fold this right side together. Then I'm going to line the flat edge up on my grid. I can also use my ruler. It's 4 3/4 inches. So you want to draw the line from the center. I want this one to be somewhere in between that ½ inch and that inch. So I'm going to measure down 3/4 of an inch from that outside edge, not from the stitching, the outside edge. And then I'm going to go to within ½ inch of the fold. I'm going to draw a line there. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the rest. So remember, you want the outside of your fortune cookie to be on top. When you fold that down, check the width. This one is 4.5. So because we turned this right side out, so turn it right side out, it's a little bit narrower. So we're going to go at that 2 1/4 mark. And we'll make this one small just so I have a variety to show you. So I did a ½ inch from that edge, a ½ inch from the fold. They look like little tacos. Okay, so this is the bigger one. It should be 6 inches. So we're going to do it at the 3 inch. And let's see what I did with this one. It's not quite open enough, I don't think, to my liking. And it is open 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to start my line an inch from that outer edge and go to a ½ inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch from the fold, because this one's bigger. I want both ends to be a little bit bigger. All right, I guess I really didn't need the pressing mat or the Cricut again. But if you wanted to press it, you could. Now, back to the sewing machine. Because the outsides of all of these fortune cookies have red in them, I'm going to be using red thread. And I have pulled up my bobbin thread like I showed you how to do before. And now because there's going to be some strain on this stitching, I'm going to go back and forth 3 times. So I'm just going to sew straight. And instead of going backwards, I'm going to really make sure I start and stop at the same place. So I'm going to lift my foot, turn the whole thing. I'm going to cut that thread so it doesn't get snarled up on top. And then I'm going to stitch to where I started. And then I'm going to do that one more time. Doing it this way is much easier and it's neater because you're going to get your threads better on the same spot in that long distance than if you were to have gone forward and then hit your back button and gone back. I tried it both ways and I really, really prefer lifting and twisting each time. So let's just get these all sewn together. We are in the final stretch. All we need to do is flip our fortune cookies and if you want to, put little fortunes in them. The stitching is here. You're going to put your finger in the center, open that up, and then pull these sides together. So the stitch line's there. And then you're just going to move it until it is sitting the way you want it to sit. And then this is the bigger one, just so you have variety, or this is a great size for money. Now, to put money in there, I just folded the, I don't know if I'm allowed to have money on video, so I'm gonna make sure you can't copy it. Okay, fold it in half again to make a long strip so it looks like paper. Then you just open this up a little bit, put your fortune or your money in there. I like to have it come out one side and not the other. That looks kind of cute. Or if you want it to be a big surprise, you can just fold it in half again and just tuck it in there. You kind of wrap it around like that, and it will help keep the shape of that fortune cookie as well. So for these little ones, you can write your own fortune cookie, but what I like to do is just take, this is off just a little memo pad, and I just do little strips about 1 inch wide. Just write whatever you want on there. I love you, Happy New Year. Or how about even like a little gift certificate? So good for ice cream. So that would be fun, a fun way to give a little gift or an outing. So same way, you just kind of open that, wrap it around. I kind of make it flat with the bottom half. Put that back. So that one is a hidden one. And then again, if you don't want it hidden, just let it stick out. So let's review 4 different ways to make them. The quickest way is using fabric and felt and just pinking shears. So you just have to sew, sew, flip. Second quickest way, fabric and felt again, but you're turning it right side out. These two are 2 pieces of fabric. This one has interfacing in it. This one has fusible fleece. That would just totally depend on what you have around that you are have little scraps of that will work for this project. And then this one, I did felt. The original one, I also did felt, but you could do any of these methods with that too. So let me know in the comments which way you think you would go, if you're gonna do this, who you're gonna give them to, give me all the details. All right, enjoy, make sure you have subscribed to my channel for more fun and quick sewing tutorials, some quilting tutorials, and more.